It's the original Four Brothers.
Bandleader Woody Herman led his big band for over 50 years, starting in 1936 and not ending until his death in 1987. Woody is considered one of the greatest big band jazz leaders, and to this day is fondly remembered by his fans and by the many musicians and friends associated with his various bands.
Woody Herman's legacy probably is that he had more great musicians come through his band. You always had to show up and give 100%. He instilled that quietly. You just knew.
Basie was just loose, and that way Ellington got involved more with intricate kind of harmonies and everything. Woody was just a straight-ahead bebop band, and probably the first, maybe the first one of that, that style. So once again, that cliche, apples and oranges, they were all different, and every one of them were good.
They called him Road Father, and there was a reason for that. Everybody loved Woody. It wasn't like other band leaders I worked with, where the band wasn't as close to the leader, but Woody was different. Woody, everybody adored him.
I can't imagine how many people went through his bands. I mean, I guess he took over from the Isham Jones band. I think I read that. And since that time, I mean, how many people has gone through him? That's thousands. And they all liked Woody. They all loved Woody, really. Woody was a great guy.
It was unleashed excitement. There was no rope mostly around people's necks. If they could play, then Woody would let them cut loose, There
was always fresh ideas coming into the band, which Woody kept Woody fresh as well. He used to say to me, I love these young guys.
I never heard a bad Woody Herman band. The band was always good. The band always swung.
He was an extremely compassionate person. He was sensitive to the surface of the skin. He was a people person. I would say, without question, he was a humanist.
He embraced your passion. You didn't just have to play for him. He wanted you to play and develop within his band.
The band's just smoking, and Woody's out there dancing around and selling the music to the old folks over there, and it works. He could sell us. He could make us look good.
The unique thing about his band was although he was the leader, everybody in the band felt like it was their band. If guys wanted to try playing something a certain way, they'd play it a certain way. If he didn't like it, he would say, try it a different way, but he'd never say, I need it to be this way.
He was a guy who understood from the beginning about getting talent and letting them do their thing. And, you know, I always loved that concept of calling him a coach, because he was always talking about his guys. He was always telling other people about his players.
I think a big band, if it's a proper one, is like, can be compared to a great team in sports. Because if everyone doesn't do their thing and do it correctly, it's not going to be a great team nor a great band.
After we recorded my favorite things, we were listening to a playback in the booth, and I remember walking out of the booth and Woody putting his hands on my shoulders behind me and walking behind me as if to say, let's play some more, you know. It was great.
If people know you've been on Woody's band, already you're going to get your phone number written down because you've already proven yourself that you can do, you know, a certain thing that that people respect. It's like you've got your master's degree in music.
It was almost like if you never played on Woody's band, you never played, kind of, you know, right through all of those wonderful players. I mean, I think it was like the University of Woody Herman, you know, sort of, you get your degree, at least one of your degrees, right from him.
This is the Palace Theater, and this reminds me of a theater that I think I played in Wausau, Wisconsin when I was an 8-year-old child. And with the money that I earned from that particular tour, singing my way into the hearts of mid-America and dancing with much vigor, with that money, I bought my first saxophone and then later a clarinet. And I became known as the boy wonder of the saxophone. And it's still a wonder to me how I survived most of those early years when I should have been spending more time in school. But it really does my heart good to see that we still have replicas of those Palace theaters and the many days and nights that I spent in them, and many years later as a band leader.
His teacher in Catholic school was Sister Fabian Riley, and he was always one of her greatest fans. And as years went on and Woody's band became famous, he gave her an annual benefit that the proceeds of the concerts would go to that school. And that went on, I guess, until she died or there afterwards.
We know that Woody was an early starter, and even while he was still in his teens, I think he was doing vaudeville. And I assume he did what Benny Goodman started out doing too, which is Ted Lewis imitation, you know.
And when Tom Guerin interviewed him, and he says, the boys tell me you dance. And he says, if you sing, dance, and play an instrument, he says, I could use you. And so Woody went to work for Tom Guerin.
Well, this was the Tom Guerin band, and this would be about 1931 or 32, I guess. I was with him one time in Pittsburgh, somewhere in the Depression period, and he received a telegram one night on the stand from his business advisors or someone, the effect that he had been more or less wiped out in the market, as a lot of people were. And so he threw a big party for the band. That takes some kind of courage.
In 1935, Woody left Tom Guerin and joined Isham Jones.
Well, Isham, I think, was, first of all, was a fantastically good songwriter and had many hits to prove it. Isham had hits like I'll See You in My Dreams, It Had to Be You, On the Alamo, or you could just go on. And he was one of the first guys that really thought about the charts. He was not chintzy that way musically, you know. And you could come in the wrong uniform, a little out of it, the whole thing, he didn't care about that. But don't miss no notes, otherwise it's you and me in the back, you know, and them guys. He used to love it. The guys got in the hassle and started fighting. He'd watch them.
There were hundreds of big bands during the big band era, and establishing an identity was critical to Woody as he built the Woody Herman Orchestra after taking over from Isham Jones in 1936.
The beginning of the Woody Herman Orchestra was when Isham Jones decided to retire and buy a chicken ranch in Colorado, I believe it was. The nucleus of the first Herman band was out of Isham Jones' band. Walt Yoder was one of them on bass. The drummer, Frankie Carlson.
To be in Carolina in the morning, nothing could be sweeter than my sweetie when I meet her in the morning.
Well, there were only about 5 of us, you know, actually of former Jonesmen. Then we hired guys, and we couldn't offer them anything. So we'd say, well, we'll give you stock, you know, we'll become a member. And if a guy was nutty enough, he'd join us. It wasn't easy because, you know, like any decisions, we had to have meetings. If I had to go to the men's room, we had to have a meeting, you know. The best one, though, was the scale in Roseland was, New York Roseland was $50 a week for the guys, and I got $75. But if somebody came in from a magazine or the press or whoever, I couldn't afford to be the leader because I couldn't afford picking up the tabs for, you know, like 2 drinks, whatever it was. Then you get some nut from the Brooklyn Eagle who wants to dance with the hostesses, dang, 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 you know, like, and I got to pay for him 10 cents a dance or whatever, right? Finally I was making deals with the manager of the ballroom and everybody. I said, you know, get off my back, man. I can't pay my rent. Big deal, leader.
As the band began to get more popular, Woody began to buy the stock from the musicians. And of course, World War II came along, and along with that, the draft.
And it got to a point along about 1942 and 43 where the guys were being drafted out from under us. You know, like every time you turned around, another guy was gone, and you had to quickly get somebody to substitute. And there were some very trying days and weeks where you never know who was in the band. And there was also this kind of wartime hysteria where guys, when you're doing 5 and 6 shows a day, which was awfully hard and rough, didn't know when they were going to be drafted, so it was a constant bidding farewell every day and staying out of it so you wouldn't have to face reality. So by the 5th and 6th show at night, we had some very fine-sounding groups at different times.
The band that plays the blues, which I think is, you know, in many ways an underrated band because it had an original conception at a time when, you know, there was such a large and competitive field of big bands. And that one, well, Woody had his own, you know, his own take on that.
Woody went through a Duke Ellington sound period. In other words, the band that played the blues evolved into, he had Dave Matthews, who wrote like Billy Strayhorn and some of the Ellington arrangers, doing a lot of the charts for the band. And so the orchestra took on kind of a Duke Ellington sound. Of course, Duke was one of Woody's mentors. And of course, Johnny Hodges was playing on alto.
He was one of the greatest alto saxophone players that there is, actually. And they called him Slurpee, of course. His mentor was Johnny Hodges. You know that. He could sing on the alto sax like I've never heard before.
There's a Johnny Hodges quality to his alto playing. That's came from Duke Ellington. And his clarinet playing was definitely Barney Bigard. And even though he seldom played jazz solos, if ever, on the alto, his clarinet solos were kind of primitive in a way. He often played just the roots of the chords, but he played them with such a great feel, and he set the standard.
1939 brought Woody his biggest hit, Woodchopper's Ball, which became Woody's signature song, his official theme song being Blue Flame. Various hits followed in the early 40s, including The Blues in the Night.
This is Woody Herman and the band that plays the blues, saying...
Jazz author George T. Simon coined the phrase Herman's Herd when writing about the band in a 1939 issue of Metronome magazine, although the moniker was not widely used until the 1944 edition of the Herman Band. All subsequent eras of the Woody Herman Orchestra were referred to as one flavor or another of Herd.
The first Herd, that was a band that had a really original conception, and a lot of what their repertory was based on the blues and on I Got Rhythm Changes. Guys in the second Herd were more, you know, they were younger and they were bebop oriented, and they sometimes referred sort of in a derogatory way to the first Herd as the I Got Rhythm Band, they called it that.
That up there, who that down there? Who that up there, down there? Who that up there saying who that down there? When I say who up there, who that down there? Who that inside, who that outside? Who that inside, outside? Who that inside saying who that outside? When I say who inside, who that outside? None of your lip there, big boy. Stop answering back. I'm gonna give you a tip there, big boy. Announce yourself, Jack. Who that up there? Who that down there? Who that up there? Down there? Who that up there saying who that down there? When I say who up there, who that down there?
And that's how the first Herd evolved, because guys were getting drafted, and so people were coming in like Chubby Jackson, Ralph Burns, and so forth, and many of them coming from Charlie Barnett's band and forming a new nucleus. And then when Bill Harris was hired in middle of '44, I believe, the band definitely had a new sound to it.
I placed them #1. I mean, this was the band. Everybody else had something going on, but not like this. This was a fraternity that was rare. You know, it was a collective that became historically significant as a model for so many other bands, admittedly or not.
By the summer of '44, they were on radio. There was a Wild Root Cream Oil show, and there was the Old Gold cigarette radio program. And by the end of 1944, Woody was off and running with the first Herd.
During the war years, when he was doing that Wild Root show, that was every Saturday night, you know, I was in earshot of a radio. I'd always get to that and hear the latest Woody, and go to the record store every month and get the latest Woody release. And there's some great things come in the middle 40s there with that first Herd. Wow.
I used to love Davy Tough. The band would play at the end, da, and then he would always, with his bass drum, go boom, 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 boom. first time I heard that, oh man, the back of my head just, the hair just raised. I said, what did he do that's so great, so tremendous?
Dave Tuff was just a groover. You know, this is a guy that could really lay down a large beat and a deep groove. Don Lemon was much more technical and could really play some wonderfully inventive fills, and a lot of drummers pick up on that. You know, so between the two of them, if you get the cymbal groove from Davey Tuff and some of the language from Don Lemon, you got a pretty good start.
Then there was Ralph Burns, who not only was a very good piano player, but was the chief arranger for the First Herd, and not only came up with a lot of good driving up-tempo things, but also some beautiful, ballad stuff.
If it weren't for Ralph, there would not be a whole lot in the repertoire, because Ralph just had a touch of genius. Very talented, and very talented guy, period.
Ralph's writing and his scoring for the sections and all that created an original sound.
Woody knew exactly what was happening. A lot of times we were pretty uncontrollable, but he was the ringmaster. He held us all in check, and he'd let us go a little bit crazy because he knew the music would come out, but when things got a little out of hand, then he'd just say, cool it, and he was the boss.
And the band was the important factor. I didn't have to sell it to the musicians. This wasn't like hiring some guys because they needed a gig and then try to convince them that what we were doing was pretty okay. The guys were carrying the flag. I didn't have to do it. As a matter of fact, it made my life quite easy.
Woody is a master psychologist, whether he knows it or not. He probably doesn't. He knows how to manipulate people. That's one of his great gifts. And he manipulated us into giving our all. Get into a town and people would be lined up outside waiting for your autographs, waiting for the band and so forth. It was a wonderful trip, as they say.
Igor Stravinsky apparently heard Woody's band. That's the first he heard them on the radio, and he was intrigued.
Let's hear Woody Herman and the orchestra play Ebony Concerto, composed and conducted by Igor Stravinsky.
It's a fascinating composition because it isn't really very jazz influenced, except in the sound of the ensemble, the instrumentation he gets out of that. But it was a real feather in Woody's cap to have Stravinsky write something for his band.
Woody was told by someone, whoever recommended Chubby Jackson in the beginning, that this guy, you'd love him, Woody. He plays great bass, but he dances and sings, and of course Chubby came from a vaudevillian background. His mother was a vaudevillian. And Woody told me that when Chubby finally settled down and quit dancing so much around with bass and started getting serious, he said his worth was felt, and so we kept him. And of course, he was Woody's talent scout. He was forever recommending musicians to Woody, even after he left the band.
Trumpeter Pete Condoli became widely known to fans for the theatrical practice of dressing up as comic book hero Superman.
Well, it was fabulous, first off. I mean, to mimic Superman in full uniform swinging from one side of the stage to the other. I mean, what is this anyway? Is this a jazz band or is this a live comic book?
Of course, he was a great singer too. I love to hear what he sang. I still play the record of Laura. I just think the way he sings Laura from the Columbia record in the 40s, I think how can you sing that song really any better than that?
Woody inveigled Johnny Mercer to put his talents into writing the lyrics to Laura, which is such a gorgeous melodic line. No wonder it was such a big hit, because the combination of the lyrics and the tune itself was a super turn-on. No one has done a more beautiful version than Woody.
Woody Herman took several months off after disbanding the first Herd in December 1946. Woody found that he missed having a band, and after hearing trumpeter Ernie Royal in LA, he set out to form a new band that included Ernie and that played bebop.
I think there are only two big bands that really captured some of the essence of bebop, which is a small group concept in jazz, you know, with Dizzy and Charlie Parker. And that's Dizzy's band, the big band he had when he recorded for Victor, which didn't last that long, but that was a great, and the second Herd.
From all the stories I've heard, pieced it together, when he went out to this ballroom here in Los Angeles and heard Stan and Zoot and Herbie and Jimmy Jufrey play in this band together, the Four Tenors. You know, Woody said, yeah, I like that sound. It was just something that they were doing just to get by with this ballroom gig they had. Everybody they hired who played tenor, so a couple of the guys would transpose the alto saxophone parts on the stock arrangements and they'd play them on tenor, so they had all four tenors. And Woody heard that and liked it. He said, I like that sound. I want to have that, but I want a baritone on the bottom. So three tenors and a baritone. And evidently he's the one who created that. You know, he heard that and wanted to latch on to it, but he's the one who promoted it.
The second Herd kind of revolutionized the sound of a reed section in a big band. Not everybody went for it, but it became the distinct Herman sound.
You phoned me you'd be late, 'cause you took the wrong express. And then you walked in smiling with your lipstick all a mess. Ooh, I've got news for you. Baby, your story don't ring true. And I've got news for you. You said before we met, your life was awful tame. But I took you to a nightclub and the whole band knew your name. Ooh, I've got news for you. Baby, that's more than I can chew. And I've got news for you. You wore a diamond watch, claimed it was from your Uncle Joe. When I looked at the inscription, it said love from Daddy-O. Ooh, I've got news for you. Baby, that jive will never do. And I've got news for you. Baby, I've got news for you. Eh?
I lost a barrel of money with the 48 and 49 band. The experiment, the public wasn't really ready for what we were into, and I wasn't sorry at all, because I felt it was something I had to do, and that to me was still the most important factor, is my own honesty within myself and what I was doing musically.
Sam Marowitz told me his stories when the first time they started that band up. First rehearsal, Stan Getz he didn't care what he said to anybody. And he looked at Woody and he said, "Man, you play the worst." And Woody said, "That's why I'm paying you to play, schmuck. Just play your part, don't fuck." And Woody could always top you. He was fast with the comebacks, you know. But those guys put him down. Neil Hefti once told Matt Pierce that he went to see the band once, and while Woody was playing, they were making gestures about Woody's playing. You know.
But they put him down musically. They sneered at his playing, and they let him know that. And that was unfair, because the little things he plays, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. That's very nice, and it fits.
Solo-wise, it was ridiculous. You're never going to get three tenor players, Stan Getz, Al Cohen, and Zoot Sims, and Serge Chaloff, the monsters. And then they had lead trumpet Bernie Glow and Stan Fischelson, two lead trumpet, and Ernie Royal, who played the high note lead. Ernie's would just blend with the trumpet section. The band was, as a band, was ridiculous. When they played ensembles, and Don Lamont, he just fit he was the drummer for that band.
Lamont came in, and Don told me that with the emergence of bebop and what Diz and Bird were doing, that the triplet was on the downbeat of bebop, of the triplet, and the swing era was triplet, 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 da 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 da. So I'd get in the middle of a new idea I had in my mind with bebop, and I'd get the accents kind of mixed up, and I'd go back to the swing, and he said it wouldn't be exactly what I wanted to play, but the band knew where I was, and they'd make me sound like $1,000,000, which I'm not sure is completely true, but that's a humble Don Lamont speaking about that. So he brought that to the band, and any drummer that a band leader starts with and says, "You're going to be the drummer in my band, and I'm going to build the second herd around you," you got to have something to say, which is the way the second herd came about.
It was like a bebop machine. These guys just had a ball because they had stimulants that helped them. That's the truth, and you might as well say it, In fact, some guys refer to it as the druggy band, or the druggy herd.
First of all, I was one of the few people, unfortunately, that was sober. I mean, I wrote this in my book and about it in all my book, and I probably wouldn't have written about it if the guys were alive. But I make fun about the things when we had, out of 16, 17 guys, we had about 13 junkies, 2 alcoholics, and about 3 of us that were straight. So I make fun. So because I could stand up and smile, Woody let me. Also, I played a visual instrument, and Woody was very show business minded.
We forget, by the way, that the second herd did have an alto in the section too, and that was Sam Marowitz. And you know, it wasn't always just that Four Brothers sound.
There were no high parts over there on the alto, and that Sam Marowitz actually was the time that they were playing. There were no high parts, a little more mellow sound. Even Early Autumn, you know, hear all those tunes, but with that combination, it's a more mellow sound than you have five saxes, whereby you have Stan Kenton with the five saxes. There's a lot of power there. This is a little more subtle, actually.
Well, we recorded Early Autumn, and we made about 8 takes maybe, because there was a flub there, whatever it was. And then he said, after the 8th take, he said, "That's a take." And then we all went home, and Stan Getz and I said, "You know something? We both played better on take 2, whatever the take was." He says, "Yeah, I think I played better on the 2." So we went to Woody's room. It must have been 11 o'clock at night. He was so beat. We were all tired because we recorded all day, and probably had a few drinks. Woody would drink a little bit. And so we knocked on his door and he said, "What do you guys want?" So we said, "Listen, you know something, Woody? we like what we played better on take two rather than the take you took. And he tried to explain to us, well, yeah, but the whole band, it's a band. It's not just, it's like a basketball team. You scored 80 points, don't mean anything if we lose. But if we win, you can score 12 points. If we win, the take 8 was better because the whole band, and we said, yeah, but our solos, but he said that take 8 was, and he said, get out of here, and he threw us out of his room. Threw us out of the room, he really threw us out. And Stan and I were bugged. We didn't talk to Woody about like a week. And to show you how much we knew compared to Woody, when the record came out, the next year, Stan and I both won the downbeat poll because of early autumn. Now, if they would have taken our take, we'd both still be looking for jobs. Well, Stan would be up there or down there looking for a job, and I'm up here looking for a job. So Woody knew exactly what he was doing. He really knew a band.
After losing money on the second herd, Woody broke up the band and for several months fronted a smaller group, only to reform the band again in 1950.
Of course, he reformed what became known later as the Third Herd, but there was a tagline that they used on his air checks of Woody's greatest band ever. And he organized it. He had a engagement booked already for Bop City in New York and the Capitol Theater in New York. So he reorganized a band that had the nucleus of some Herman alumni. Well, one of the great spark plugs of that band was Santiago on drums.
And I couldn't get over playing with these guys. Ralph Burns was the piano player, and I thought he was an arranger, and he wrote all those pretty things like Early Autumn and all those tunes that he wrote for Woody. They were ballads, but he was a hot player. Bam, bam, bam. You could hear that he played like it was a brass section, and it was comping. And I said to Red, I said, Jesus, I never knew Ralph could play like that. And he said, oh, he's something else. It's wonderful with him in the rhythm section.
I can name just about all of them. Buddy Wise was playing first saxophone. Bob Graff was playing the third. Marty Flax was playing baritone. I was playing the second tenor. And back of me was Bill Harris, Herb Randell, and Jerry Dorn with the trombones. The trumpets were Connie Condoli, Don Ferrara, Johnny Bello, and Doug Metamik. The rhythm section was Red Kelly, Santiago, and Dave McKenna on piano, and Woody and Dolly Houston.
In 1951, and Nat Pierce was the piano player on the band, and they came to town, and so we hung out, and Nat said, you ought to write something for us, so I did. Woody is kind of known for doctoring up other guys' charts, and I call it press conference, and apparently he thought that was too inside. So he put a trumpet and baritone and drums and bass on the front of it for a chorus, and to get a mulligan idea in there, and called it Mulligan Tawny. You know, for whatever reason, only Woody knew.
In '51, we were playing at the Roosevelt Hotel in New Orleans. And Irby Green had to leave the band. His wife was having her first child. So he recommended a trombone player to replace him. It was Carl Fontana. Because that book was built around the Bill Harris stage, a lot of trombone solos. So we got on the bandstand and Carl was there playing Irby's book. Well, he got up to play a solo. Woody always had a knack of testing how a guy played by playing Woodchopper's Ball, which is in D-flat blues, and they let him blow. And if he couldn't say something in that, you didn't make it, you know. And he started playing, and those two guys, particularly Fagerquist and Doug, they perked up, you know. From that point on, they stopped drinking. And I said that was when the Third Herd got started. Because Carl came in the band and picked up the whole tempo of the band, excited the band.
I like the way Woody played alto. You know, he had a real kind of a romantic sound. I like that. And his clarinet playing was nice. He played kind of the same licks all the time. You know, all that kind of stuff, but he played good clarinet, he played good alto.
The band was made up of like the players that drank a lot, the players that smoked pot, and the hardcore, you know, junkie guys. So, and who would I choose? I chose the junkie guys because those were the better players. I thought in my mind, Al Pacino was on that part of that band, and I thank God I never messed with that stuff. But I just was fascinated to see what they did, you know. And it just was an eye-opening experience to me.
Woody continued fronting his big band throughout the late 50s, but changing music tastes, including the introduction of rock and roll, made running a big band challenging, to say the least.
The fourth here, that was a period of time that Woody's band kind of went undercover. He always had great bands, always had great musicians, but some of them were not, you know, widely known, like tenor saxophonist Bo Boyd, great player. That was in 1959, and of course in 1959 he played the Monterey Jazz Festival.
That was a great band because it wasn't overloaded with brass, you know. He had sense enough not to add another trombone, because all that fourth trombone, all it does is take the sizzle off the lead trumpet, you know. If you got 7 brass, you can hear that lead trumpet play. You can hear the fuzz on his sound and everything, like Gazzo or some of those guys, you know. And so he knew that, and it was just a standard sized band, and he did all kinds of, well, you know what he did, you know.
There was a preacher down in Dixie who preached a special way. He said, work real hard on weekdays and you can play. To illustrate his sermon on every Sunday morning, the preacher played and played and played upon his favorite horn.
He's not a slave driver or a, you know, Simon Legree with the whip, and okay, guys, do this, do that. He kind of lets it evolve all by itself. It makes it more comfortable for the guys that work for him, because that Boy Scout type band leading went out a long time ago. You know, your $50 fine, you didn't shine your shoes and all this kind of stuff. But Woody always makes it comfortable, more as if you were working with him or rather than for him.
It was, let's go, 1, 2, 3, 4, bump, bump, bop, up to me. You know, that's how it was, and it was, and you played it. And it was straight ahead, boom.
And here's that old Brooklyn folk song, Your Father's Mustache. Yeah. Bow, bow.
One of Woody's most fondly remembered bands was the Swinging Herd from the early 60s. It took a couple of years to get the band up and running, but the results were outstanding. This band featured Phil Wilson, Bill Chase, Jake Hanna, Sal Nistico, and also included longtime Herman pianist and arranger Nat Pierce.
Nat was trying to talk Woody into going with a big band, and Nat was saying, I'll run the band, I'll write, and all you have to do is front the band. And I think Nat knew that if the band started to really happen, Woody would definitely take over, which is exactly what happened. Nat was brilliant.
The band started getting a regular personnel, and it was sounding better and better. Bobby Jones was playing lead tenor, and Larry Cavalli on tenor saxophone, and Phil Wilson came on as first trombone player. But the night that Sal Nistico came on the band lit up like there was a big spotlight on them all of a sudden, because I realized now we have really something to offer, something really wonderful and great, because he inspired the whole band himself.
Because he had such propulsion, you know, when he played. So that when you're a drummer and you're playing behind Sal, you don't have to, I mean, you could just, I mean, he's going, you know. You don't have to like push him or anything or goose him. Man, it's there, you know. It's just this train, you know. It's just, but beautiful, beautiful player.
Gus Johnson left, and Jake Hanna came on the band. And so we had Nat Pierce, who was also the band arranger.
And Nat Pierce was like a road father to me, you know, as he was to almost everybody, you know. And I mean, the Grizz, why we called him the Grizz, you know, short for Grizzly Bear, but, you know, the Grizz took care of me.
And we also had Chuck Andrus on bass, and the thing just took off and lit up. And of course, the tempos lit up too, because Sal Nistico could make it. He could make all those tempos and make them swing.
I did. I got it within 5 minutes. This guy was, in many ways, he's in it at the top of the heap. I don't think I've ever heard anybody that could play as masterfully. And I think, as my brother puts it, the fact that he could play these tempos and still swing.
I think it reflects a will. We all wanted to make it. There was a universal thought for all of us. We all wanted to get on the jazz map, you know, all of us. As Woody used to say, the band was relentless, and it was.
I called Abe up, and I said, Woody said for me to call you. He says, oh yeah, we're going to start here, and we're going to rehearse 2 nights in New York before going on tour. So I showed up, and this is where I met Sal Nistico and Joe Romano. Frank Hittner was the baritone player at the time. I think he had just left, made a third group band. And David Gale was the trumpet player. Bill Chase, of course, was the lead player. I think Billy Hunt might have started later, but I'm not sure about that. Jerry Lammy was the other trumpet player. And of course, Phil was there now. And saxophones, I think Frank Hittner was baritone, Sal Nistico, Joe Romano, and I'm not sure who the other tenor player was right now. But anyway, Nat was there, and he had Chuck Andrus and Jake Hanna.
Jake had more of that streamlined, swinging, hot beat in the 60s. Jake's will to swing and not take himself too seriously, have fun on the job, but keep that thing swinging no matter what. You know, and he had a band full of horses too, with Sal Nistico and Chase and Phil. You know, I mean, that was a great band. You know, Nat Pierce, Dr. Deep on the piano. So that was one of my favorite, if not my favorite, Woody Herman bands, 63.
Baby's great big feet, lonely, lank, had nothing to eat, but she's my baby, love her just the same. Strange about that woman called Caledonia's her name. Caledonia, Caledonia, what be your biggest? love you just the same. Raised by that woman called Caledonia's her name. Caledonia, Caledonia, will make your big head. Yeah, look so nice tonight, Caledonia. Tell me everything, tell me more, tell me all, Caledonia. Love your long, lean body, Caledonia, Caledonia. I'll make your big head so hard.
All of us knew each other. Even Nat. Nat comes from Belmont, Massachusetts. So do I. You know, so this really wasn't a matter of getting to know the unknown, getting, you know, the people together. It was really very much like a family.
The band played with what we call balls, okay? We'll just put it that way. Because it was a strong band. The band was force and it was like excitement, you know, that happened.
And he called that solo of mine on Lonesome Old Town a slide for life. And, you know, he was dead right. I've been working all the rest of my life based on that solo. If you really wanted to even focus in on it, it was the entrance.
Well, I always have my own classification name, my own nomenclature. I call it the Renaissance herd. I would rank them equal to the first herd or the second herd. I mean, that's why is it. And the Renaissance herd has got it all.
We were playing everything way too fast, But Woody didn't care. I mean, it was all, and you got Chase playing, like playing lead, like just, spouting it out,
And his sense of time and then playing lead trumpet was exactly like Jake Hanna's. So there was no doubt as to what was going to happen, where the time was going to sit, because they had it together. They just automatically happened. And so it was, I would say, easy to play and swing with the band because they laid it down like it was nobody's business.
Woody was very demanding, but he wasn't demanding in the way that, you hear certain band leaders are just nasty people. He had a great instinct of knowing when you were your most vulnerable, and that's when he would do something to bring you down to earth.
I think some of Woody's bands had more of that out and out enthusiasm and spirit and raw swing more than almost any other band.
Starting in the late 60s, the influence of rock music started to be felt in the jazz world. Woody embraced the new sounds of rock and integrated many elements into his band's music, including electric piano and bass. This trend held steady through the early 70s but had started to diminish by the late 70s.
Woody had a young band, primarily, you know, college-age kids, just like Buddy did and Maynard did. You know, those bands would always have young personnel. I think young people seeing players that aren't that much older than them, it's very helpful. He was doing 2 different books, which he always did. You know, he had that great dance book that Nat Pierce wrote for him, which I loved to play. Those were probably the most swinging charts that he had. And then there was the newer stuff that Alan Broadbent was writing for him at that particular time, plus a couple of things that were written for him by Evans from Chicago, Can't Get Next to You, and I can't, there might have been 1 or 2 others. Not too much from the Swingin' Herd book, other than the dance book.
Of course, he had recorded those cadet recordings, the Richard Evans. He always played some of those Richard Evans charts, mostly on dances, but there was a couple of them that he would play on the concerts. That one he played a lot, I Can't Get Next to You, I think. And he played Light My Fire, that was kind of like his little hit. And that one, the Chicago tune, the one with the numbers. There was a couple of nice arrangements, or nice ballad arrangements on those cadet records. I know he did those.
Drummer Ed Soph joined Woody in 1968. He returned several times through the 70s and early 80s.
Soph, to me, and most every other drummer that was on Woody's band after him, will say that he revolutionized big band drumming on Woody's band because Woody let him. Up to that point, it had been pretty much hi-hat on 2 and 4 and swinging and kick the band and bring it in. And Ed was coming from a more modern way of playing at North Texas, where the hi-hat wasn't always on 2 and 4. And you could break up the time a little more, and Woody liked it.
Woody was famous for editing arrangements provided to his band. This practice lasted Woody's entire career.
Oh, yeah. The Alan Broadbent came in with a chart. It was Adam's Apple, it was called. And he just turned that thing right around. He just, you know, put the first part on the second, and here, there, and over there, and perfect. And though he was a great editor, he was.
Because I was in the studio when he was doing a date for Fantasy. I think the tune was Come Rain or Come Shine. I witnessed how he took care of editing something that he heard that he thought could be better. I remember that tune and the response by Bill Stapleton, who said, "Boy, Woody is right on. It is so much better right now." He was amazing.
Alan Broadbent, actually, we were at Berkeley together. He was a senior, or he's in his last year, I should say, and I was in my first year. And then he went off to join Woody's band. So he had already been on a few years before I actually got to the Herd. But he had become Woody's principal arranger. So he was writing all the time. They had him set up with a wooden work table in the second row of the bus. He would write on the bus. And you know, when you're writing for a band that you're working with night after night, that's a different experience than, say, somebody calls you up and says, you know, can you write a chart for the band?
You got to play the rock and roll charts, but you also got to play the old classic charts and the newer things by Broadbent and Stapleton. When I was there, we did play a lot of Stapleton's charts. He was, that was Woody's guy then, and so even on the concerts, we'd Come Rain or Come Shine, we did a lot of Stapleton charts.
I suggested, you know, this is the time where the band is ready for giant steps. And this was an arrangement that I wrote years ago. This was a chorale that I wrote, and Bill Stapleton and I got together, and we did the giant steps. And that won a Grammy.
Of course, Frank Tiberi is one of the great unsung tenor players in the world, really. And so many people have taken from him and you know, brought their sound to prominence, and not too many people know that Frank was such a strong influence.
I learned a lot about everything, about playing in a band and developing my own way of playing through harmony, playing with Frank and studying with him really each night.
After Giant Steps that we won the Grammy, then on Back to Back it was Naima, and you know, that was a Thundering Herd.
Exploring that with Frank night after night and feeling the reaction from Woody and the audience and everything really was a springboard into a lot of the music and the ways I've developed through the years.
And he just looked at me dead in the eye and he said, "Don't forget, this is your band, pal." And it took me a minute to figure out what he meant by that, when that is that he trusted the drummer on the band. If you were his drummer, because he would count off, you know, like La Fiesta's in 6/8, dun 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 dun, 1 2 3 4 5 6. He goes, here's one by Chick Corea, 1 2 3 4, you know. But it was 6/8, so the rhythm section would just nail the tempo out of nowhere, and that's what he wanted you to do. That's what he meant, you know. So live up to that responsibility. I need you. And he was saying the drummer's an important part of this band. You gotta live up to that. So that was the first couple of weeks on the band.
For all of us, we were all in our early 20s when we played with Woody. And that certain period there, late 70s period for Woody, we were all really way into it and deep into trying to develop our own ways of playing, and it really came through every night on the band. We would find a lot of things that were happening and played a lot of jam sessions afterwards, at clubs, wherever we were.
Trumpeter Bill Byrne joined Woody in 1965, and in 1967 became the band's road manager, lasting through the late 80s.
You like on each band, they have an admiration for the leader. If you listen to them closely, you have an admiration for him. I'm sure the guys on Maynard's band, they get a big kick out of what he does, and Buddy Rich and Stan the same way. Basie comes up with something fresh, you know, like when Woody plays, all of a sudden he'll throw in something the guys have never heard. Like when he was a young man, he was down in New Orleans. He'll throw in some stuff he heard then, you know. You can come up with something fresh, you know, and the guys get turned on by it.
The Blues in the Night. 1 2 3 and... When I was in me pants, my mama done told me, son, a woman with sweet talk, she'll give you the big eye, but when that sweet talking's done, a woman's a two-faced, a worrisome thing who'll leave you to sing the blues in the night. Now the rains are falling, hear the train a-calling, ooh-wee. Hear that lonesome whistle blowing across the trestle, ooh-wee. Ooh-wee, ooh-wee. Oh, lickety-clacks echoing back the blues in the night. will start the trees to crying, and the moon will hide its light. Man, you got the blues in the night. Take my word, the mockingbirds will sing the saddest kind of song. Ain't no something's wrong, and he's right. Big towns, I've heard me some big talk, but there is one thing I know. A woman's two-faced, a worrisome thing who leave you to sing the blues in the night, the blues in the night, the blues in the night, got the blues. There's blues in the... Man, that's some kind of blues, believe me.
Woody went back to a more straight-ahead jazz form after the rock-oriented late 60s and 70s. His last few years also brought about many personal challenges.
There were certain people that were really aware of the heritage of the herds, you know, and they were familiar with those first 2 or 3 or 4 herds that were kind of legendary, you know. So they'd come up and say, you know, I saw the band back when it was the 2nd herd or the 3rd herd or whatever. And they say, which herd are you? You know, as if we were keeping track. And by that time, it would be a really unflattering number anyway, you know. So they would ask what herd I belonged to, and I'd say, I'm a member of the Seldom herd, you know. Because at that time, we were really in some obscurity when I first got on the band, and we were Seldom herd. And in fact, you know, we only worked about 3 or 4 nights a week when I first got on the band, and that gradually increased and got better and better. Until '86, when it just exploded, because that was 50 years as a leader for Woody.
So all that time when he was older, and he should have been just, he's out in one-nighters, we're in Japan, man, and I'm looking, here goes Woody, I was sitting someplace, and there he goes walking across this big airport inside, and dragging his, you know, his suit bag, you know, and everything, and schlepping across. And Jesus Christ, look at that. Ain't that awful that he's got to do that? And he did. And he never complained about it, man. He just kept going.
In my case, it's a hobby. It's never did anything for me financially, really. I had 2 great years in 46. And 45 and 46 were my 2 biggest years. It's all been downhill since then and before that.
In 1981, Woody Herman's room opened at the Hyatt Regency Hotel in New Orleans. The club stayed open a little less than 1 year.
We had more people on the stage than in the audience half the nights we were playing there. It was a shame because it was a great idea, but nobody in New Orleans knew the club existed. And they didn't know it was there. You got to start with the PR. It was totally mismanaged from the start. It's a shame because it was supposed to be Woody's home late in his career. Then we'd go out on the road. The plan was to go out on the road in the summer. But ironically enough, Woody's wife, Charlotte, died at the time just after the club closed. She was really sick, and he went home and he was able to be with her the last couple of weeks of her life, which was very ironic. Then the club closed, and we were sitting there with no work, basically, because they didn't plan on it closing.
I wrote all the things on his 50th anniversary album, and all but 2 pieces, I believe, on the last album he did, 3 pieces on Woody's Gold Star. So, I was pretty happy with that. It was his last 2 albums, and what was pleasing to me was some reviews in the last 2 albums stating that my charts kind of brought him full circle back to the early Herds, which kind of felt nice since that was the end of his life and the end of his musical life especially. So it was kind of touching when I read that. It was a compliment to me, but it was also kind of touching that I could kind of tie his life all together in a nice bow.
One night we're playing the Hollywood Bowl. I think it was the 50th something, anniversary or something, I don't know. But the place is loaded, and the big full moon is right at the back of the thing, and I'm looking at it and thinking, what a great thing this is. And I looked over at Woody, and he looked over at me, and we smiled, man, because we knew that was the epitome, man, as far as, playing the bull ain't bad, And we were simpatico, very much so,
We were talking about his tax problems, and he says, I'm going to tell you something. He said that the IRS does not know, but he says this current band, the 50th anniversary band touring right now, has grossed more than at any period since 1946 when they made the most money. He says, I don't think they can do anything to me anymore, and he says, I'm too old for boxing.
His legacy was, giving these guys the exposure that he felt they needed to get. He said that to me many times. It never made it about him.
I get carried away by good sound. That's about where it's at. At some point, I'm almost the same as the audience is out there. But as long as I can derive this, whatever it's called, this enthusiasm, I feel that the man wants me to do this.
Woody's band manager failed to pay withholding taxes for the band over several years. By the late 1960s, the IRS claimed that Woody owed over $1.5 million. The problem was never rectified, and Woody continued to owe the money during the last 20 years of his life. Due to this, he lost his home to the IRS in 1985 and was forced to rent it back from the new owner.
What was going on when you first heard about it? He said, well, we were contacted by the IRS and said I owed almost $1 million. And he said, how could this be? You know, he said, we were just fighting to stay alive financially. And of course, Abe Turchin was a good friend of his.
Well, Abe, you know, he took the withholding, you know, and Woody didn't know anything about it, and he was playing the horses, you know, and losing, of course, you know. He was one of these guys with wristwatches up his arm, you know, one of those jokers.
Abe was a likable guy, very smart, and he got Woody out of debt. Then he put him in debt the second time around.
But in those days, the band was not incorporated. It was in Woody's name. So the IRS went after him. And he had many, many confrontations with the IRS over the years. They tried to confiscate the music, and at one point, I believe it was Nat Pierce had a second set of charts made for the band, you know, in case that ever happened. But he told them, if you take my music, I can't work, and if I can't work, I can't pay the IRS.
In late 1986, Woody suffered congestive heart failure in New York City. He recovered, but his health continued to decline throughout early 1987. Despite his health problems, Woody embarked on a new tour starting in January 1987. The last concert of the Woody Herman Orchestra, led by Woody, was in Grand Meadow, Minnesota in March 1987. Shortly thereafter, Woody checked into a hospital in Detroit, Michigan.
Carl Jefferson from Concord Records was nice enough to pay for an ambulance plane, and I flew with him on the ambulance plane to LA and to Century. He checked into Century City Hospital and was there for about 5 days, and then went home, and then you know, came back, he kept going back and forth to the hospital.
I remember him grabbing Bill Burns' arm and saying, I want the band to go on, and you know, it was very touching, and it was sad at the same time. At that time, it was still maybe April or May, so we still had hope that he was going to get stronger, and unfortunately that didn't happen.
On September 3rd, 1987, a deputy delivered an eviction notice to Woody and his daughter Ingrid to vacate Woody's home. Enough money was raised to allow Woody to stay in his home, but on October 1st, 1987, Woody returned to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center for the last time.
Woody didn't want he didn't want a band after he died until 6 months before he died. He finally gave in and said, but listen, it's gotta be a band that continues to be contemporary, where you continue bringing in new music, getting rid of old music, and we continue going into the schools and educating. Those were stipulations. He said, I don't want this to become a nostalgia dance band.
We had a taste at the bar, and we were just talking and talking. He said, I'd like you to have, you know, lead the band. You know.
He had one wish. He kept repeating this. He said, please, please, help get my music out there. Whew. That was it.
There's two kinds of music, good and bad. And we've tried like mad to play good mostly. That's my contribution.
Well, I think the legacy of Woody Herman is some of the greatest big band music ever made. I don't think that's hyperbole. I would say that holds true for me.
A great vocalist singer in his day, quoting Mel Torme, he could have been a matinee idol.
He was really a terrific singer too. He really was good. I didn't realize for a long time how good he was. You know, and it's no wonder that in those early years he was the first band leader that could make $1 million, you know, because he was such a great leader. He was a singer, and he was a player, and had the whole thing.
Woody attracted players. Okay? Now, when I say players, I mean cats who can play. You know? You could be a player and just read your part, but Woody attracted personalities, and he would feature them and let them give the band new shapes through the different generations, if you say, or the different eras of the band. He fed off of that, and he would look for that.
Woody's level of music was the best of any band I worked in. He had the best arrangers, Ralph Burns, Al Cohn, Neil Hefti. Those three alone and something else.
Woody never had a bad band. Never had a bad band. First Herd and Second Herd are probably the two greatest bands they ever had, but every one of those bands are great. You look at one of the bands that had Bill Chase and Sal Nistico and Jay Hanna. I mean, you know, it takes a whole band to make a band, but right there, every time Sal Nistico played with that Sister Sadie, every time I see it on YouTube, it's comparatively as good as what Paul Gonsalves did with Duke Ellington on Perdido, whatever the thing. Sal Nistico was a monster. Like I said, he found these young guys. He never had a bad band. If I was going to write something on a tombstone, I never had a bad band. If you don't believe it, listen to the record, you know.
The first thing comes to my mind for the legacy of Woody Herman is letting the band members be free. Letting them, and what I mean by that is he would let us get angry. He would let us do things that in other bands you'd get fired for. He'd let you, he liked that wild side of a person. He would let you get away with that because it would add to how you performed, you know. He wanted you to let loose. And it was a great legacy. All bands didn't have that.
Yeah, I mean, you can listen to somebody, well, he's not the greatest alto, no, Charlie Parker was. He's not the greatest clarinet player in the world. No, Benny Goodman was, you know, so, no. But he was one of the best band leaders in the world. And he took care of business on the alto and the clarinet.
Woody had to be on the road. Woody had to be on the road. It was like his home, you know. If we were off, he couldn't wait to get back. I know it. We used to talk about it. You know, we figured, wow, he's getting older now. I mean, he's going to be, he would just get out there, wanted to play in front of some people.
That band was it, 4 saxophones with Woody, 5, 3 trombones, 8, 5 trumpets, good God, 13, 3, so 14, 15, 16 guys, all putting the 8th notes to where they belong. The odds of that happening are rare.
Immediately, my response would be that he was the swingin'est leader as a leader. Woody's consistency, regardless of the era, regardless of the herd, they all swung. There's just no question about it. You can hear, you know, some portion of some tune, you said, that's Woody's band. Well, how many people can you do that with?
He should be up there with the jazz giants, but nobody seems to put him in that category. Everybody talks about big bands. They talk about Ellington first, Basie second, Stan Kenton third. But everybody forgets about Woody Herman. I don't know why. He outlasted them all. I don't understand that, but that was Woody. Woody never pushed himself on anybody. He was a very humble man.
He gave us a lot of space to be ourselves and to just play and hopefully find the right solution to his band's needs. He was never a taskmaster. He loved to hear people blow. If somebody could play, he'd let them blow all night long. You know, when Greg Herbert joined the band and stood up and started to play, he just let him go, you know. And same with Bill Stapleton and Alan Broadbent and Danko, Harold Danko. So if you could play, he let you go. He loved to hear people play, and I could just see by the look on his face that he loved nothing more in this world than to stand in front of that band and have it roaring behind him.
It was a hot big band. That's all I can say. It was just swinging, hot, and except for the period where he, you know, during the Light My Fire days when he went a little bit more to the eighth note thing, it was always known as the hot swinging big band. That band was hot.
Again, Woody's philosophy, which I always liked, he says, I don't need a band of nice guys. Give me a bunch of pricks who can play. And, you know, right on.